Round of applause for Joe. Thanks. So it's always nice to be introduced with an accent, because as I say, the British accent or the Australian accent, it just adds a 20% premium on what's being said. It just sounds that much better. So if any of you can tap the accent during your presentations, use it. It will give you that 20% edge. Thank you. So the operations plan. Well, a little bit about my background. I had my first business when I had my first lesson in operations. I had a magic show production company, and it was a small company, and it would do weekly magic shows. And I was the magician, so I was the major cost center. It was a one-man shop. And I ran into a problem because I could only do a show a week, and that was a real problem. And so it was an operations challenge. How do I take what's pretty strong demand and increase supply? And in this case, supply was my time. And so I came up with the idea that if I could just free up my time, I could double or triple my business. And so I went to my school principal and told him that I needed to get out of class early. And he told that 5th grade student who was 11 years old, we don't do that. And I said, but I asked. And he said, it's pretty bold. Okay, you can get out of class early. And I doubled my business. So I got a lesson early in life, at 11, that to be an entrepreneur is to be bold. It's to ask. It's to say, what's the challenge, what's the problem, and think outside the box. Come up with a solution, and often the solution is really simple, and often the solution requires that you just ask. So don't be afraid to come up with what seems like an absurd answer to a simple problem, and don't be afraid to pursue it. And I'm not joking about that. That really did happen. And it was great, because I got out of class. And 5th grade class is not long. So my career as an entrepreneur probably started then and moved more deeply into operations over time. And when I was a student at Stern, I worked full-time for a startup. And that startup was a hand prosthetics business, and similar challenges. Always just running up against supply challenges, technical challenges, distribution challenges, and there were always operating solutions to every problem. There was always, and so you come out of those kind of experiences knowing with confidence that you can overcome every single problem with just really good thinking, really practical thinking. Common sense goes a long way. And then I started a company out of college while I was consulting for Fortune 100 companies. And again, the consulting jobs, the consulting assignments were all business development. Same principles apply. In telecommunications, in the emerging at that time mobile market, same disciplines, same concepts for operations. We built a company from a nascent state startup to a $30 million private label company, which I sold in 2006. The timing was lucky, it was not smart. And since then, I founded a company of which I'm founder and primary funder, and all I do is invest in companies. So my experience base is very much so operations driven. I'm an investor. So when I speak to you, I'm speaking as someone who has built a company that's been operations driven, and I'm also looking at every one of your concepts as an investor. I'm on the board of an organization called New York Angels. New York Angels is very involved in the business plan competition in the city. At NYU, we love this program because we see real businesses come out of this program. So when we read your business plans, when we mentor you, when we go to the showcase next week, We're looking at each one of your businesses as we look at all the other businesses. We're putting you on a scale that measures within New York City, that says, is there something there? You know, is there a big idea? But more importantly, do we believe that these entrepreneurs are the ones to pull off that big idea? Don't underestimate. This is a measure of you as individuals. When we make an investment, we are making a bet on you. We are not betting on the business. We are betting on you. So, you know you really well. You need to know your business really well. That's articulated in the operations plan. You know, when we look at the percentages and say how we're rating these, the operations plan has a relatively low percentage. I look at the operations plan more than anything else, it is the acid test for whether all the other aspects of your plan are real. Because when the operation plan looks weak, it's usually because there are other aspects of the plan that haven't been thought through. And they articulate in the operations plan, in the part that's called execution. If the execution looks weak, or if it looks not flushed out in an area, it's because something else hasn't been thought through. The revenue hasn't been thought through, the price points haven't been thought through, your technology hasn't been thought through. Something is not right. So, you know, the business plan process, we start off with let's get their attention. Let's have a really attractive concept, and then we move to, it could be huge. Here's our hockey stick. You know, scale. This business concept is off the charts. It's going to be bigger than we could imagine. And we have the team to pull it off. So at this point, you've really got the investor's interest, right? You're teed up. You're in great shape. And then we hit, you know, is it believable? Can they pull it off? We hit that execution question, which is what the operations plan is supposed to communicate. So you want to explain how you're going to pull it off, right? How are you going to implement this business? So let's talk about what an operations plan is not. It is absolutely not a footnote to your business plan. It's not, here's a great business plan, and oh, by the way, the epilogue and the endpoint, the postscript is, this is how we're going to pull it off. No. It's not something you figure out later. And it is not a set of assumptions that drives your financials. That's not what it is. All right, what is it? It really is a live document. It's how are you going to execute? And it really, more than anything else, if you get from today, you know, it needs to be something that's very alive. It's very believable. And how do you do that? How do you make something believable? How do you know, breathe life into a plan, into what's a document? And more than anything else, you know, draw on the real world. Draw on live experience. I mean, all of your concepts right now are on paper, but there's a live element to it. I mean, there are customers out there right now. There are competitors out there right now, right? Talk to them. Talk to those customers. In fact, it would be great if your business already has customers, because they're real. And if they're paying customers, that's even better. I mean, that means that you're currently in business. Refer to competition. Whatever your concept is, there's already competition out there. And if you say, we have no competition, you know, and you have a blank white space, you haven't thought through anything. You haven't thought through anything. There's competition for dollars at a minimum. There are alternatives out there. There has to be something in place right now. You haven't identified unique demand that is completely underserved. You haven't. Although you may think you have not. There is some, whatever your demand state is, there are competitive alternatives out there right now. And so you have to talk about competition. If you have a concept without competition, pass. We're not looking at that one. You know, you need to lay out the demand state, the competitive state, And then you have to talk about what kind of resources you need, people, and it's usually people and players, what kind of resources you need in order to build your business. There's no way that you're going to be doing it entirely in-house. There are going to be third parties involved, whether they are suppliers or brokers or intermediaries or distribution. You're going to need to lay out what resources you need in-house that you need to own and hire directly. And you also need to lay out those resources that are not going to be in-house, and how are you going to manage those resources? How are you going to integrate them into your complete business? Got to lay out milestones. If your plan does not lay out what we're going to do in 3 months, what we're going to do in 6 months, what we're going to do in 12 months, what we're going to do in 18 months, it's not believable. We're not going to be looking at that plan. If you simply lay out 5 years from now, we're going to be huge, pass. Next. We need to see the 12-month map really well. And we need to see how well you've articulated your 6-month milestone. Because 6 months means you're doing it now. You're doing it now. And if you lay something out in 6 months that has a $10 million business and involves a life cycle that takes ordinarily 18 months, we're not going to believe that at all. If you lay out a 6-month milestone that is development, check, 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 and we'll see later, we're going to say they're burning money and they're not getting out there. They're not testing. They're not validating. We're not going to believe that one either, because we know that's just a burn. All you're going to do is waste money. And then 6 months from now, you're going to say, we learned a lot and we are absolutely nowhere in our business. And that's not interesting. So this is what we're going to do in 6 months. Really important that you articulate something that is believable and achievable. And you've mapped it out beautifully. And how many in this room don't know what they're going to achieve in the next 6 months? Like, there should be no hint, you know? Oh, come on. Most of us have a pretty good idea of what the next 6 months look like. In our personal lives, in our business life, in our school life, you know where you're going to be 6 months from now. All right, it's going to be summer, moving into Labor Day. But we have a pretty good roadmap of the next 6 months. If you can't articulate that in your business plan as a milestone, pass. Not interesting. So there's this concept that we're putting out there about developing a believable plan. How do we do that? How do we make it believable? Well, let's build a working model of our business. Let's make it real. A, you have customers, right? Every business has customers. Right? I know of no business where you don't have a paying customer. All right, so let's identify the customer. Are you supplying a product or a service? That's a basic question. And sometimes it's both, but you really ought to nail down which of the two is dominant. What resources do I need for that product or service? How do I deliver that product or service? What have I learned from field tests? If you haven't tested something, if you haven't validated your concept in the field, in the real world, pass. Not interested. Every one of your concepts, when we hear, oh, it's so secretive, and we don't want to leak it out, and we don't want to let anyone know what we're doing, so we're not testing it at all. Shh. That's absurd. I hate to break it to you. You ready for this? Whatever your idea is, someone else has already thought of it. I'm sorry to break that news to you. Someone has already thought about your idea. I have not seen, there are two things that I haven't seen during the past 3 years. I haven't seen a unique idea where I haven't seen some version of that same idea before. All right, that's a big statement. And that's based on seeing not hundreds, but thousands of business plans. Thousands. It's like, oh, there's another one of those again. And I hate to break it to you. So unique idea, no. Field tests, gotta see them. We want some validation. I want to know that you've got 30 paying customers, 50 paying customers, 100, 1,000. We want to see some traction. We want to know that your idea is validated. And if you can't demonstrate that in the field, in a working model of a business that completes the full cycle from identify customer and deliver end product to customers so that they are satisfied and they're forking over dollars, if you haven't demonstrated that cycle, how believable is any concept that you're going to put out there that you can grow this thing? Right, so you've got to go through that working model of your business. So those answers to those questions are how you build a believable plan. You know, and when you get those answers to those questions, it begins to drive, really in a simple manner, your financials. Because all those resources that you need, all those customers that you acquire, what they're willing to pay, builds your cost model. So you have a really good sense. You have a really good sense of your cost drivers based on all those resources that you need as part of your business. So these three questions are a pretty good way for each one of your businesses, just so I can get a sense of head count. How many are saying yes to the first? Okay. Yes to the second? Okay. Yes to the third? Pretty, and then there are some who didn't raise their hand at all, so what is your business? What's not on this list? These three questions didn't capture the entire universe of businesses. So for those who didn't raise your hand, what would the question be? So you're not providing a product, you're not providing a service, you're not a web or a content business, and you don't have physical product. I'm just curious, what are you doing? What is your business if it's not included in that list of three? All right. I'm going to assume that you're just not sure, so you didn't raise your hand. So your business may include all of the above. Try to pick one of these three. You know, are we fundamentally a service provider? Are we a content provider? Does our business involve a product? Right? Pick one of the three. In all likelihood, it's all three, meaning you're kind of, yes, we're providing a product, but the web is our channel. Mobile is our channel. Yes, we're providing a service, but it really kind of reads like a product because there are physical attributes. Pick one of the three. You know, are we a service provider? Are we a content provider? Are we a product? Are we a product-driven company? Because that really helps in determining your cost drivers and your operations and what you need to do well, what you need to articulate well in your operations plan. So if you are a service-driven business, so for those who raise their hand, you know, it's all about people. You know, in most cases, services are provided by headcount. Now, a lot of that can be automated, in which case you may lean more towards the engineering side, and then kind of maybe you get reclassified as more of a content provider. But for the most part, a service business is a headcount business. It's a human interaction. It is a, how do I manage my sales force? How do I manage my consulting team? How do I manage that human capital that is being deployed to provide this service? So you're going to be spending a lot of time on who are those people, how are they compensated, what kind of training is required to get them up to speed. Often the entrepreneur is completely up to speed. They know how to do this service thing that they're talking about, and their concept requires that they replicate themselves 100 times, right? And they underestimate how much training it takes to become, you know, that player. And they're like, oh, we can get someone up to speed. I can replicate myself in a week. No, it might take 5 years, or it might take a lifetime, because what you know is so ingrained in who you are, and it's formed at a very young age, that you can't really replicate that in a week. And so you really want to know, what is that training curve? Is it, you know what, we can get someone up to speed and trained in 3 months. And that's really, and it's based on getting several up to speed and trained, and it takes 3 months. And this is how many of those people are out there. This is the support they need. This is the sales cycle, right? Because things usually don't happen instantly. You know, there is a period of time in which the closing cycle will require that this trained personnel, and then there's the post-close. and the after sale, you really need to know those numbers. What's the head count? How many people do I need? What kind of math is involved? So for a service-driven business, we find, and these are generic principles. You may borrow and cheat across the 3 types of businesses to build your plan, but this is a pretty good guide. We find that service-driven businesses focus on, the best plans focus on that human machinery to run your business. It's very people-driven. And we like to talk about those as being kernels, little kernels of information that will help build a sound plan. And things like, a salesperson is 75,000 plus commissions. That's what we expect to. And so these statements, if you look at them, they're very specific. They're very detailed. Like maximum coverage for one salesperson, 300 accounts, right? That's really detailed information that seems what? Believable, right? It's based on fact. It's based on your either rolling out the business yourself or based on your review of competitors, right? This is the math that's involved in that human machinery. And all of that becomes very compelling, becomes very fact-based. And when you present it to investors, the impression is they know what they're talking about. They've done this before. In fact, they're already in business. Here, quick, checkbook, give. So the analytical approach to building the operations plan is really saying, what kind of business am I in, right? If it's service, it's personnel driven. I'm very aware of things like compensation, onboarding, training time, cycle time, lead time, closure period, and then I'm focused, so I'm not missing the message about what is critical to run this business. It turns into, let me get a lot of data points about that thing that's critical to my business, and let me drive it into data. Fact-based information that will build a believable plan, right? And in fact, give me a roadmap, right? Know what I need to do to be successful. Content-driven business. And we really ought to change that icon and bring it into a mobile world, into a social world, because man, the market is changing. It is what's happening in our industry. I don't even know if there are pure content plays anymore. Right? They start to look like product plays. I mean, it's such a horizontal function that we're looking at traditional businesses that deploy content and use mobile and social as channel. I'm involved in a bunch of businesses that look like that right now. They're very, very exciting. Real rule changers. But anyway, it's all like Jeff Carr said before. It's all about traffic. And this space has become very, very crowded. And the traffic is audience. Think about it as audience, which translates into, and no one's thinking about this enough, customers. So drive traffic, acquire audience, acquire customers, paying customers, not ones that we just get them to engage and then we're going to do things to them for a revenue model. Those are becoming more and more difficult to justify. But it's still about traffic. So think through things like do we have a strong UI? What does it cost to keep it fresh? What does a CTO cost these days? Can we really outsource it? Everything is about lifetime value of a customer. What is it worth? If we talk about it in ad dollars, it's not as compelling as transaction dollars. Ad dollars, very crowded field, and the players that are AOL, revitalized AOL, Bing, Yahoo. Their machinery for churning those ad dollars is extraordinary, and what they're doing is the piece that we all get is very little because we go through their machinery and they really own it. So it's very difficult to build an ad-based only business today, because you don't have the machinery that can slice and dice and deliver as well as the incumbents. And you know, it's not really a compelling argument to build a pure ad-based business. Very tough, very tough. Focus on infrastructure. If you are a content player, you need to have in place the ability to generate that content on a consistent basis that captures and engages this audience, that continues to drive traffic and continues to have it perform. So the kernels that we get from that are and again, in your business plan, you always want to drive down to these really specific types of statements that are based on information from the field, right? So that you know that, you know, we can get our curators at $35,000 and they can cover a region that is defined, you know, by local characteristics. And we know the number, and we know what they can cover, and that's enough content to drive, you know, our business. You're real specific about, you know, your approach to search and what those costs are. And you really can nail down the value of a customer, right? Because if you don't know the lifetime value of a customer, you don't know what you're willing to spend to acquire them. And it really is a game right now of how much am I willing to spend to acquire them. And if you don't know lifetime value, you don't know the answer to that question. Same endpoint. Data-driven, fact-based. So you can articulate in your plan very specific information about your business that brings it alive, that makes it real. Right? And you're going to go through the same process. What is important about the business? What are the drivers operationally? Field information based on live conversations and live engagement in your business, so that you have very specific data points. Data, right? And then that data translates into a believable living business plan. So the last category that we covered is a product-driven business. I had to go with fashion because I know a thing or two about fashion, and because it's Fashion Week. And Marc Jacobs just postponed his show tomorrow. Is that incredible? What do you all think about that, by the way? Or does anyone know about that? Does anyone follow fashion? Do you know about that? Why did he postpone his show? Yeah, because of snow. Does everyone believe that? He didn't get the product ready. He was late, and Nemo came along and he said, good excuse. And Marc Jacobs is Marc Jacobs. It's the #1 show out there. Well, Ralph would be offended. So, a product-driven business. It's all about sourcing. You've got to get the product. And now some would say, no, it's about branding, it's about distribution. Yeah, right, but it is all those things, but you must have, since you're a product-driven business, you must have what? Product. Product. You have to have product. You can have, and a lot of the plans that we are seeing, a lot of the businesses that we are seeing, they are fundamentally product-driven, and they describe really well the demand state, and all of that is very strong, and the branding is strong, and the positioning is strong, and then they get to the product part, and they're like, yeah, and then we're going to go to the deliver product. And you're like, oh my God. They haven't thought